everybody see the screen that I'm presenting? Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us. For those of you who I have not had the chance to meet, my name is Andrew Cook. I have the pleasure of serving as the superintendent for the Hartford Central School District, and on behalf of the administration, our athletic departments, and our medical staff for both the Hartford Central School District and the Fort Edward Union Free School District, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us tonight to learn more about our baseball and softball preparedness plan in anticipation of the 2021 season. Caleb, don't forget to mute yourself. You're good now.
I am muted.
Now you are. You're good. You're distracting me already. So I'm sure as the season starts, there's a lot of questions on how the season will play out and what participating in the baseball softball merger will look like in this unique spring season. We're going to do our best to try and answer as many questions as we can for you this evening. And there will be a time at the end for you to ask us any questions that we didn't have an opportunity to address throughout the course of the presentation. Just as a word of warning, though, this is just a general overview of the baseball and softball program in totality. Additional information regarding your child's specific level, whether it be varsity, JV, or modified, will come later on from the coaches. So we won't get into the specifics of each level, but just as what the total program will look like. For those students who have participated in either the winter season or the fall 2 season, a lot of the items that we're going to address tonight are going to be very similar for you. So before we begin tonight, I just want to take a moment and thank those who are working tirelessly behind the scenes to allow athletics to occur this year. Our nursing staff, Nurse Arlen, Nurse Capone at Fort Edward, our high school principals, Mrs. Dupuy, Mr. Galarno, and our athletic directors, Coach Capone and Coach Huntington. There's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes in a normal year. In this COVID year, that work has increased exponentially. And for us to even be able to be at this point to offer this program in a merged environment is a credit to all the work that's occurring behind the scenes. So as we start, I just wanted to make sure that we recognize these individuals for all of their hard work as we progress throughout the season. So as we get started, here's just a couple of particulars. The spring season is scheduled to start on Sunday, April 25th, and it's going to conclude by Wednesday, June 16th, just prior to the Regents exams. There will be a 1 week overlap with the current fall 2 season. And for those students who are currently participating in a fall 2 sport, you will be able to carry over a number of practices into the new year. Baseball players, you can carry over up to 4 practices. Softball players can carry up to 3. Even if the fall 2 season is done prior to the start of baseball or softball, the practices from the fall 2 season still carry over. So even though, let's say, soccer or volleyball ends on Friday, anybody who participated in soccer, a boy who participated in soccer, they're going to be able to carry over. They're going to start Monday or Sunday with 4 practices already under their belt. Same holds true for softball. If they participated in soccer or volleyball or football or cross country or field hockey, they'll be able to carry over 3 practices for their softball before the season even technically begins. It is important to remember, though, if the fall 2 season continues during the week of overlap, student athletes can only participate in 1 practice or contest per day. They can't go from soccer practice from 2:30 to 4 and then go to baseball practice from 5 to 6:30. They can certainly go and attend, but you can't double dip those practices. You can only count it once. Each preparedness plan must include a telephone number as well as an electronic means for members of the community to report concerns related to our safe operations of athletics. On the slide and posted on each school district's website is a phone number that you can direct calls. You can see the one listed for Hartford as well as one for Fort Edward, as well as an electronic means and an email address for Fort Edward where you can anonymously report any concerns related to our athletic offerings, specifically related to COVID. Depending on the number of student athletes that we have, we are anticipating offering 3 levels for each sport: varsity, JV, and modified. As we've done in the past, we're going to participate at both locations, Hartford and Fort Edward. We're going to do our best to try to equally distribute the number of practices and contests at each location, but we can't guarantee you that it's going to be a 50-50 split. There'll be a number of variables that'll pop up throughout the course of the school year that might require practices or games to shift on the fly, but we're going to do our best to try and make sure that each district is equally represented with facilities throughout the school year. Advanced placement is allowed for the spring 2021 school year. So those 7th and 8th graders who might want to try out for JV or varsity, that option is available this season. And the Adirondack League is recommending that we do allow spectators for the spring season. We're recommending that 2 spectators per student athlete will be allowed to attend each game, whether it's in Hartford or Fort Edward, and we're hopeful that that will carry true for all of our away contests as well. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Mr. Ward?
No, I'll add one thing. So there's a small caveat that every time we write those at the league level, we write as long as the venue can do so safely.
Right.
But our venues are pretty much the same size. But if something got changed, like if a softball game got changed to an indoor venue, which isn't going to happen this year at the Dome, obviously, there might be a change in the rules for spectators. But besides that, we're looking to do the NISPA maximum 2 per student athlete.
And how each district will handle that might depend. We might give spectators badges to carry to the game to check in, or we might ask our players to list the spectators are going to come with them with a contact tracing document like we've done for soccer in Hartford. So more information will come forward with that as we get closer to the start of the actual contest. In order for student athletes to be able to participate, they do have to complete the medical process, which includes an interval health history form, the concussion form, our medical service permission form, and you must have medical clearance if you're considered a higher risk student. So in this period of COVID, if you are a student with an underlying medical condition that may be exacerbated with the COVID pandemic, we have to have specific medical clearance from our school physicians to allow you to participate. So hopefully our student athletes have been turning in these forms as we go throughout the weeks so that they're ready to participate come Sunday or Monday. Academic eligibility is still in play. The students will follow the academic and eligibility policies for their home districts. If you're not sure on the specifics for your district's eligibility policy, please reach out to either the high school principal for your district or your athletic director. They're very well versed in these and they'll be able to help guide you throughout that process. Specifically for Hartford students, we will be going off initially the quarter 3 grades. All right, so the quarter 3 grades are what we're using to determine academic eligibility to start the season. Once we get started, we will be following the Adirondack League COVID protocols as well as any guidance from Section 2. We do anticipate that Section 2 will be providing additional guidelines for the safe operation for baseball and softball within the next day or 2. Once we have those, we will make sure to distribute them out to you, but we will have to follow any directives that come down from Section 2, NISPA, or the Washington County Department of Health. We will be following our normal league schedule, and we're hopeful that there will be some sort of crossover or championship contest at the end of the season. And at this time, I do believe that Section 2 is trying to coordinate some sort of a sectional tournament during the month of June. COVID closures. If one of our buildings is closed due to a COVID-related incident, baseball and softball will be canceled for that day. If we have to go fully remote because of a COVID-related issue, athletics will also be canceled for that day. We can't run interscholastic athletics if we're closed due to a COVID situation. At this time, in anticipation of additional guidelines from Section 2, we're going to continue with the protocols that have been in place for our winter and fall 2 season. So masks will be required for all participants at all times. Unfortunately, gaiters will not be allowed unless they have the ear flaps, no valved masks, and there is no exceptions for not wearing a mask. All students will have to wear a mask. Students will have to complete the daily screening as they're doing currently to attend school. There's no additional screening required to be able to participate in baseball, softball. The daily screening that they do to attend school on a daily basis will be sufficient. Our coaches will be asked to maintain an attendance log for practices and games that include the student's name, address, phone number, and email in case there is an exposure at practice or a game. That way we have that contact tracing information readily available. And just as a general reminder, any participant that has an illness must follow, or has a symptom of an illness, must follow the New York State Department of Health COVID-19 flow chart for schools before returning to athletics. If you're a contact of a positive, you have to get clearance from Washington County Department of Health in order to return. If you end up being COVID positive, you have to have medical clearance before you're able to return. If you're symptomatic, please don't come to practice. Please don't come to game or to school, right? Make sure you're following your district's protocol for illness and symptoms in COVID so that we don't potentially expose a larger number of students and have to shut down the whole program. As I mentioned, quarantines, contacts of a positive will be quarantined by the Department of Health. School districts have no say in how long the quarantine is. It's 10 days from the date of the last exposure. We will need release notes to submit it to Nurse Arlen or Nurse Capone before you're eligible to return. And COVID positive individuals do need medical clearance in order to return. We're really encouraging participants to avoid social gatherings outside of practice and to be vigilant in adhering to the social distancing rules outside of school and outside of practice. Again, we don't want a large social gathering to then shut down our schools, as well as shutting down our baseball and softball programs for the season. A lot of work has gone into this. Our baseball and softball programs did not get a chance last year to participate, so we're really excited to be able to offer this opportunity for the kids. So we need to be very vigilant in adhering to the social distancing rules to ensure that our students have this opportunity this season. Hygiene and safety, this is nothing new. Student athletes must provide their own supplies. There's no sharing of items. Clothing, towels, masks need to be washed daily. We encourage our student athletes to bring extra masks in case something gets soiled or dirty so that you have a spare to be able to substitute. Any shared equipment will be disinfected frequently. Participants must follow their proper hand hygiene practices. Section 2 and NISPA have said, no high fives, no fist bumps, no hugs. Sanitize your hands before entering the field, after exiting the field, or at a break between a practice or a game. And coaches must follow social distancing regulations. They need to stay separated from their student athletes unless they're demonstrating a skill or a drill. Travel, there's a lot of travel with the merger, both for practices and for games. The daily health screening must be completed before arriving to travel to practice. The reopening travel protocols must be followed, which currently means one student per seat on the bus unless they reside in the same household. Masks must be worn at all times. There's no eating on the bus. Carpooling is discouraged unless they're members of the same household. And students do need permission to drive themselves. If a student has a reason why they need to drive themselves to practice or a game, they do need prior authorization from your building principal and or athletic director in order to do that. There's no eating at school or on school facilities at practice. That includes seeds. I know baseball seeds, sunflower seeds is a huge component, but with the seeds and the spitting, that is a high-risk behavior that the Department of Health has frowned upon. We're not allowing congregate dining, which means the bus will not stop at McDonald's on the way home from a baseball game. And we're encouraging that there's no team gatherings as well. Again, we love these things. We want our students to experience these activities, but the priority is ensuring that we can run a successful program. So we're trying to limit those social activities. So I went through a lot of information fairly quickly. Mr. Ward, Coach Capone, Coach Huntington, is there anything that I neglected to mention that you want to discuss?
I think you did a great job, Andy. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Andy.
So at this time, if anybody has any questions, please feel free. I opened up the chat. Please feel free to type your question in the chat. We can monitor the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself to ask a question. We're here to try and answer as many questions as we can for you.
Mr. Cook or Mr. Ward, can you just go over how many practices they need prior to their first games and you know what that entails, please?
Yeah, good question, Coach. So baseball needs 10 practices and able to participate in their first contest. As of right now, the first league game for the HFE baseball program is scheduled for May 5th. So that would require practicing on starting Sunday, April 25th, and practicing every day until that May 5th game. If a student athlete was sick or missed a practice or school was closed for any of those days, the team then would not be able to participate. So we did have a league meeting today to talk about that, and I think our first game is against Warrensburg. So there is discussions about potentially moving that game to give us some flexibility with the number of practices. Softball, I believe, is required to have 6 practices before their first game, so there's a lot more flexibility with their schedule. I believe they're also scheduled to begin Wednesday, May 5th, too. And yeah, someone typed in the chat, advanced placement is allowed. Advanced placement is allowed, yep, as long as the student qualifies for the team and passes the APP performance test, yes.
I'm going to jump back on what Mr. Durkee said and just put it out there for folks. With the timelines being as tight as they are, student athletes are going to have to attend practice every day. So please take a look at those dates and make sure when you're planning things, that you take into account those dates. Because if we can't, neither school can have a team without the players from the other school. So please do your best to commit to those practices. Things come up, people have appointments and such, but if we don't have enough for a game, we hate to be canceling. The time is tight and a ton of work has gone into doing it. And once we get behind, there are not a lot of dates to make things up. The league season will end, and then sectional seeding will occur, and sectionals will start. If we don't have all of our league games in, that affects sectional seeding. I know that's a long ways off, maybe not the number one concern of everybody. We're just happy to be able to play baseball and softball this year, but certainly don't want to get to the first game and find out that 6 of our players have missed 1 or 2 practices, and therefore they're not eligible, and we can't play in a game.
And and with that too, we've learned throughout the season, if you don't have enough practices, attending a game does not count as a practice. You actually have to have a practice on that day as well. So because of the merger, because of the travel, our availability to have a practice prior to a game for 1 or 2 students to try and make up lost time may not be feasible. So as Mr. Ward said, really look at those dates. We're trying to work out some logistics to give us a little bit of a buffer, but there's not going to be much of one, if any, if we can figure something out. So Peyton asked, do you know how many games will be played? I don't know off the top of my head how many games, Peyton, no.
Jeff, did you look? Do you know how many league games there are?
We're trying to get the normal league games. We're shooting for 18 to 20 game season.
We have 10 scheduled right now.
And then you have your 2 Adirondack League and then your sectionals, and then you can continue to play until June 16th. So even if sectional ends and you don't qualify to go on, you can still play till June 16th. So you could play other teams that also didn't qualify for sectionals.
Correct.
And that's a change just for this year because of COVID, that after you lose in sectionals or are eliminated, you could play some non-league games. And then, thanks, Coach, for having the 10-game answer there. I was trying to pull the schedule up as we were talking.
And Maddie, you had asked, are varsity boys and girls going to be riding the same bus together? Probably not, because of the limitations on how many people we can put on a bus. The transportation is going to be, it's normally really interesting. I know it's a big headache for our athletic directors and transportation supervisors to try and figure it out in a normal year. So this year we're going to ask for a lot of flexibility and understanding and patience with that. But most likely we're going to be taking multiple buses to venues for contests.
Right. That same 22 passenger rule on a 66 passenger bus is in effect for athletics as well. So it's gonna take some teamwork to make that happen.
Julie had asked, Jeff, do you know what time and where practice will be?
Well, remember, we're going to try to shoot to make that Wednesday game, if at all possible, just to save on arms. If we do have to change it to a Saturday, we would be playing 5 games in 8 days.
Yeah.
And with our pitchers and the way the pitch counts work, it would be a lot of strain on the kids. So I'm having an optional practice on Sunday for anybody who would like to get a practice underneath their belt. Hopefully anybody in 9 through 12 at Fort Edward. It's not supposed to be the greatest weather, so I'm going to check the weather, but I'm going to shoot for probably like 10 in the morning at Fort Edward. And then the following week, everything's going to be at Hartford.
And more information, we'll send out specifics as soon as we get that nailed down. And yes, Peyton, that's this Sunday.
So there's one from Jacob about driving our own vehicles to practice. We haven't traditionally allowed that without special permission here at Fort Edward. I'm not sure, Mr. Cook, about what you guys do over there. Certainly, if there's an extenuating circumstance, we have where you contact the athletic director. Athletic director talks to the principal, and a decision is made. For good reasons, we try to limit the number of student athletes that are driving back and forth. School buses is statistically much safer than a bunch of individual vehicles with young drivers moving back and forth between school districts.
And then there's another question there. Can parents attend practices right now? And correct me if I'm wrong. We're not allowing parents to attend practices, just contests.
Yeah, and we may have missed it, or I didn't hear it be answered. Do we know when practice will start for the girls?
Yeah, we're gonna start Monday, since we have a little bit more wiggle room with our schedule. Since we only need 6 practices prior to a game, we're gonna start on Monday.
And Melinda, where are we and what time?
So JV varsity girls will be at Hartford, and that's gonna be, we'll probably get over there around 3:30, 3:45-ish, and then modified softball will be here at Fort Edward. So the shuttle will be running modified students from Hartford to Fort Edward, and then varsity and JV players will get on the bus to go back to Hartford.
Okay, awesome. And I see Peyton's got one in there. Peyton, I'm pretty sure Coach Jerky said 10 a.m. on Sunday at the Fort.
Just to touch base with all the practice times, for those of you that are familiar with HFE, there is a remind there, and I send out all the times on the remind daily with it. So if you're not a part of that HFE remind, it's important to join it. It's the best communication tool out there. If you go to the Hartford CSD Athletic website, the information is on the front page of that, of how to join that remind, and I will provide the coaches with that information too, so people can join. And it's crucial because, as everyone has said in this meeting, things change almost hourly with this merger. So the first day, I've already got it figured out. I'll get that information out to people before the weekend, so I'll send it out tomorrow so people can plan accordingly. But like Coach Huntington said, the first bus is going to leave Hartford around 3:10, and that's going to bring modified kids from Hartford to Fort Edward. So they'll arrive there around 3:30. It will then in turn bring JV varsity players from Fort Edward back to Hartford. So they'll arrive at Hartford around 3:50 to start practice. That bus will go back to Fort Edward, and then it will return the modified players to Hartford. I can't remember the time. I'm sitting in my car right now, but it's on there. It will return. It's about an hour and 45 minutes, hour and 50-minute practice. I have it returning the modified kids to Hartford. Then it will take the JV varsity kids from Hartford, the Fort Edward players back to Fort Edward. And I think everything wraps up around 6 o'clock on day one with it. But I will send that out on that Remind tomorrow. If you're not on the Remind, go to my webpage, the athletics webpage, and join it there, and you'll get all the information.
Thanks, Andrew. See it, check here. So girls who play volleyball for Fort Edward have a game on Monday, so they will miss the first practice. Yep. If there's a game on that day, then they would miss that first practice. But they are allowed to carry over 3 practices as well. So if Monday's their last game, when they show up to practice on Tuesday will actually count as their 4th practice.
And so I see Sally is asking about, is there a place for kids to go after school before practice? And she's talking specifically about softball practice on Monday. So that would be over at Hartford.
I know for Hartford, we'll identify a spot in the building for students if they have to stay here to be supervised before their practice.
And on the Fort Edward end, Lorinda, I'm assuming that they'll be with you, and the same thing, Jeff. If kids are waiting for practice, they'll be with you here at school.
I'll make them go to sit in my tutoring hour. I'm sure they'll all be loving that.
Hey, if it gets the grades up, we'll take it.
You're not kidding.
No, I appreciate your questions. I appreciate your time tonight. Just to reiterate what I said at the beginning, a lot of work has gone in on the back end of this to be able to get us to this point, just in a normal season. But with all the COVID stuff, we really owe a debt of gratitude to our nurses, our athletic directors, and our coaches and our high school principals for putting all of this together and making it run as seamlessly as possible. From my perspective, and I would say for Mr. Ward too, we sit as the league leadership for the Adirondack League. I got to say, this is probably one of the best run mergers for athletic programs in our area, both in terms of success, student participation, and just the ease of operation. So that's a big credit to everyone that's on here, working on the back, and for all the support from our parents and guardians and student athletes. So thank you very much.
Yep. I echo that. One thing I just wanted to say, and you're going to hear this several times, when you go to a venue to watch one of the games as a spectator, it was right. Somebody asked, every human being counts, whether it's a baby in your arms or a younger sibling. So it's two has to be 2. The other is, when you get there, it would be helpful for us, especially as we had the first couple of games, if you look around for the person who's trying to get the contact tracing form completed. We're trying to do as much as we can ahead of time. But if when you show up, you can just say to somebody, hey, did you see who's doing the contact tracing form today? And go up to them to help it make work a little bit more smoothly, so we're not searching for people. We want to make sure that it's accurate. We're hoping, knock on wood, to have no issues to worry about. But anything you can do to just get to that person and make sure we have your information would be helpful.
Jacob, I do see your question about Sunday. We will look to try and get a bus for Sunday, and we'll put out more information for you tomorrow on that. So we'll stay on for a little while longer. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to type them in the chat or unmute yourself. But other than that, if you don't have any questions, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your support and all of your patience as we work through this.
And I just want to reiterate that Sunday will be anybody 9 through 12, because that's basically our tryout system and making sure we have enough numbers for all 3 levels going forward. As I think, what do we have, like 3 or 4 days before you decide whether you have to have varsity JV modified. So all the numbers that we could have would be beneficial to see where we stand. And paperwork obviously is number one. I mean, getting that stuff in to make sure you're eligible to even come to a practice.
I don't know. I think we're good. I'm going to say I'm excited for the season, and well, I'm sure we'll be seeing people out on the fields. We're working to get them in playing shape for sure after some snow yesterday. Have a good night, everybody. I'm going to jump off.
Thanks, Mr. Ward.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you.
I'll stay on for a few more minutes if anybody else has any other questions. If not, again, thank you very much for all of your time and patience, and excited for the season to start.
Thanks, Andy.
I'll stay on as well if anybody has any questions for varsity baseball.
Thanks, Andy, and the coaches. Appreciate the work you guys are putting in to make this happen for these kids. Trust me, they need it.
Thank you. Uh, 10 a.m. on Sunday, right, Jeff?
That's what we're going to shoot for, because the weather's supposed to be coming in later on in the afternoon, and we want to stay outside and try not to have everybody in the gym with that many numbers.
And we'll look for Hartford people still on. We'll look to try and get a bus like 9:30ish or so for you.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
All right, well, I'm going to stop recording so I remember to do that.